It began with a scream. Not from inside the house, but from the man standing on the front lawn, his trembling hand clutching a phone, his voice cracking as he told the 911 dispatcher that something was terribly wrong. It was a cold autumn evening in the quiet suburb of Cedar Falls, Virginia. The air was still, the street lined with trimmed hedges and glowing porch lights. To neighbors, everything about the two-story home at the end of Maplewood Drive seemed ordinary. But inside, the scene was anything but. When police arrived, they found David Miller pacing in the driveway, his shirt untucked, his hair disheveled, and his eyes wide with panic. "There's blood," he stammered, pointing toward the bedroom window. "My wife and daughter, they're gone. Someone broke in. Please, you have to find them." Inside, officers expected chaos, overturned furniture, shattered glass, something to suggest a violent struggle. Instead, the house was pristine. Every surface gleamed. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Nothing seemed out of place, except for the master bedroom. There, a queen-sized bed was soaked in blood. The sheets were torn away, the mattress stained deep crimson. A jewelry box lay open on the dresser, its contents scattered as though someone had rushed through it. Yet not a single drawer elsewhere in the house had been disturbed. There were no footprints, no forced entry, no broken locks. Detective Laura Green, who had worked homicide for over a decade, surveyed the scene carefully. Something about it didn't feel right. "Too clean," she murmured to her partner. "It looks staged." David Miller stood in the hallway, his hands shaking as he tried to answer questions. He claimed he had returned from a late shift at the auto shop around 8 p.m., only to find the front door unlocked and the upstairs light on. When he called out for his wife, Karen, and their 7-year-old daughter, Emily, no one answered. Then he saw the bed, and called the police. He sounded distraught, his voice catching whenever he mentioned their names. But to Detective Green, his story had cracks. There was no sign of a forced entry, no smudged prints on the doorknobs, no muddy footprints leading from the door. The floors looked freshly mopped. Even the trash bin was empty, except for one thing, a used cleaning cloth streaked with pinkish residue. By midnight, the house was cordoned off with yellow tape. Technicians photographed every corner, collected samples, and searched for anything that might indicate where Karen and Emily had gone. But no bodies were found. Neighbors gathered on their porches, whispering as patrol cars came and went. To them, the Millers had seemed like a happy family: David, the quiet mechanic; Karen, the kind woman who taught Sunday school; and little Emily, always on her bike, her pink helmet glinting in the sun. But in the days that followed, the picture of that perfect family began to unravel. Detectives discovered that the blood on the bed matched Karen's DNA, not Emily's. There was too much of it for her to have survived. The small traces of blood on the floor led to the garage, where a section of concrete appeared recently scrubbed. Investigators also found a tarp missing from David's workplace supply inventory. As they pieced the timeline together, doubts grew about the break-in story. Nothing had been stolen except for a few inexpensive pieces of jewelry, and even those looked carefully selected. The house, the robbery, the entire scene, it all seemed like a performance. Still, David maintained his innocence. He appeared on local news, pleading for the safe return of his wife and daughter. "Please," he said through tears, gripping the microphone, "if anyone has them, bring them home." His voice cracked. His eyes glistened. To the public, he looked like a heartbroken husband. But to Detective Green, he looked like a man acting out a script. And behind that performance, she sensed something much darker waiting to surface. The following morning, Detective Laura Green returned to the Miller residence. The autumn sun had barely risen, and the house was bathed in a dull, cold light. Inside, forensic teams were finishing their work, cataloging fibers, photographing stains, and bagging samples of what appeared to be diluted blood from the bathroom drain. David Miller sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee. He looked exhausted. "I didn't sleep," he muttered when Laura approached. "How could I? My wife and my little girl are out there somewhere." His voice trembled just enough to sound believable, but Laura noticed the faint redness around his eyes that wasn't from crying. It was from fatigue, maybe, but also something else, anxiety. The kind that comes when someone knows more than they're saying. "Mr. Miller," she began softly, "I need to ask again, are you sure nothing was missing besides the jewelry?" He nodded quickly. "Just Karen's ring and a few things from her box. I think they took them when he trailed off, shaking his head as if he couldn't bring himself to finish. Laura studied him for a long moment, then turned toward the laptop on the counter. "Is this yours or your wife's?" "Karen's," he replied. "She used it for work. And photos, I think. Do you mind if we take it?" He hesitated just a second too long. "Yeah, sure. Whatever helps." That hesitation stayed with Laura as she left the house. Back at the station, the digital forensics team began combing through the laptop. What they found was not what anyone expected. Karen's browser history revealed recent searches for emotional abuse signs, divorce lawyers in Cedar Falls, and how to file a restraining order. Her emails showed she had been corresponding with an attorney, discussing plans to separate from David. The last email was sent 2 days before she disappeared. But there was more. Hidden in a folder labeled Taxes 2023 were photos, screenshots of text messages. They were between David and another woman, someone named L. The messages were unmistakably intimate. "L, you know she'll find out eventually." "David, she won't. I've got it under control." "L, you said that before. I'm not doing this anymore." "David, don't walk away now. You know I can't lose everything." Laura stared at the screen. A secret affair, the oldest motive in the book. She ordered a background check and soon identified L as Lisa Turner, a coworker at the auto shop where David worked. Detectives paid her a visit that same evening. Lisa opened the door nervously, clutching a cardigan around her shoulders. "I already told you," she said before Laura even spoke. "I didn't do anything." Inside, she admitted to the affair but claimed it had ended weeks earlier. "David got controlling," she said. "He said he was going to fix things with Karen, that they just needed a clean start. I thought he meant counseling. I swear I didn't know what he really meant." When Laura asked what she meant by that, Lisa looked down at her hands. "He said something weird a few days before it happened. He told me, soon it'll just be me and Emily. We'll be okay then." I thought it was just talk, like he was upset about the marriage ending. Those words hit Laura like ice. He didn't say, "me and Karen." He said, "me and Emily." Meanwhile, the lab results confirmed that the blood on the mattress belonged to Karen, and that traces of bleach had been found in the carpet fibers and bathtub drain. The amount of blood indicated fatal injuries, most likely inflicted while she was lying in bed. Investigators also discovered tiny wood splinters in the sheets, later matched to a broken baseball bat handle found behind the garage. It had been wiped clean, but not perfectly. To the detectives, the picture was becoming painfully clear. Karen Miller had likely been killed in her sleep. Still, no one knew what had happened to Emily. On the 4th day, a search team combed through nearby fields, rivers, and wooded areas. Volunteers joined, carrying flashlights and posters with Emily's smiling face. The image, bright eyes, freckles, missing front tooth, was everywhere, on lampposts, store windows, and car windshields. But as the hours passed with no sign of her, hope began to fade. Back at headquarters, Detective Green confronted David once more. "We found evidence that Karen was planning to leave you," she said calmly. "And we know about Lisa Turner." His face tightened. "That has nothing to do with this. Doesn't it?" Laura leaned forward. Karen wanted a divorce. She was taking Emily. You were about to lose your family, your house, your reputation. He slammed his fist on the table. You think I killed my wife? That I'd hurt my own daughter? Laura didn't flinch. I think you've been lying, Mr. Miller. And I think you know exactly where they are. For the first time, his mask slipped. His breathing quickened. His jaw clenched. Then, just as suddenly, he leaned back and smiled bitterly. You don't have a body, he said quietly. You don't have anything. Laura held his gaze, her voice low but firm. Not yet. Outside the interrogation room, she turned to her partner. Start the warrant for his worksite, she said. If he used that tarp, it didn't just vanish. The next morning brought a heavy fog that hung low over Cedar Falls, blurring the edges of the small town. Detective Laura Green stood in the parking lot of the Miller Auto Repair Shop, holding a fresh search warrant in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. The shop smelled of motor oil and burnt rubber, a mix of grit and familiarity. David Miller's co-workers looked uneasy as the detectives walked in. Most of them had seen the news. They knew their friend and colleague was under suspicion, even if they didn't want to believe it. Morning, Laura said, flashing her badge. We're here to search the premises. We'll try to stay out of your way. Inside the storage shed behind the main garage, they found what they were looking for, or rather, what wasn't there. One of the mechanics, a tall man with grease on his forearms, pointed toward the shelves. There were 3 blue tarps here last week, he said. Now there's only 2. I thought maybe David took one for home repairs. He borrowed stuff all the time. The inventory records confirmed it. One industrial-grade tarp, the kind used to cover heavy equipment, had been checked out under David Miller's name 3 days before his wife and daughter disappeared. Did he ever bring it back? Laura asked. The mechanic shook his head. No, ma'am. That missing tarp became the focus of everything. Detectives suspected it might have been used to move a body, but where would he have taken it? The security footage from the repair shop parking lot provided an answer. On the night of Karen's disappearance, at 11:47 p.m., David's truck was seen leaving the lot. In the truck bed was a large, rectangular bundle wrapped in a dark tarp. He was alone. The footage ended there. 2 days later, the investigation shifted to the Cedar Ridge landfill, a sprawling, 200-acre expanse of waste on the outskirts of town. Trucks moved constantly, the stench of decay heavy in the air. Finding anything there would be like searching for a needle in a mountain of refuse. But they had to try. Laura stood with her partner, Detective Reuben Shaw, as teams in hazmat suits spread across the site. The landfill manager met them with a grim expression. We rotate dumping zones every few days, he explained. If the load came from his neighborhood's pickup schedule, it would have been dumped somewhere in Sector 14. The area was massive, a layered field of compacted waste, dirt, and industrial debris. Excavators rumbled in the distance as officers dug carefully, following the scent of motor oil and decay. Hours passed. Nothing. The sun sank low, turning the gray sky a bruised orange. Just as Laura was about to call it for the day, one of the technicians shouted from the far end of the sector. Detective! We've got something. Laura rushed over. Buried under several feet of compacted waste lay a blue tarp. It was knotted tightly, bound with duct tape. The smell hit first, sharp and metallic. As officers gently peeled back the layers, what emerged silenced everyone around. Inside was the body of a woman, wrapped in what appeared to be a floral bedsheet. Her hair was matted, her face pale beneath the dirt and plastic. She had been hit multiple times in the head, injuries consistent with the broken bat from the Miller garage. It was Karen Miller. Laura's chest tightened as she stepped back, the sound of buzzing flies filling the air. Get forensics, she said quietly. And mark everything. Every inch of it. But something else caught her attention, a smaller shape within the folds of the tarp. For a moment, she feared the worst, but when the forensic team unwrapped it, it turned out to be a child's blanket, embroidered with the name Emily. No body. Just the blanket. That small piece of fabric, pink, faded, and smeared with blood, sent chills through everyone on site. News of the discovery broke that evening. Headlines filled every screen: missing mother found in landfill, daughter still missing. The story gripped the entire state. David Miller was brought in for questioning immediately. He didn't resist, but his face told a different story now, tight, drawn, and defensive. "I didn't kill her," he insisted, pacing the interrogation room. "I came home and found the blood. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I thought if people saw the scene, they'd think I did it." "So you cleaned it up?" Laura asked calmly. He nodded. "Yes. I was scared. I got rid of the sheets, that's it. I didn't hurt her. But her body was wrapped in a tarp from your workplace and dumped at the landfill," she said. "You expect me to believe someone else did that?" He hesitated, then looked down at his hands. Maybe they used my stuff to frame me." "Who's they, David?" Silence. Laura leaned forward. "Where's Emily?" He didn't look up. "She's safe," he whispered. "Safe where?" But he didn't answer. That night, Laura sat alone in her office, staring at the evidence board, photos of the house, the tarp, the landfill site. The only missing piece was the little girl. Something about David's last words echoed in her mind: "She's safe." It wasn't a confession, but it wasn't denial either. It was something in between, a statement of control, maybe even pride. She wrote 2 words on the board in red ink: "Find Emily." As she capped the marker, her phone buzzed. It was forensics. "Detective Green," the voice said, "you'll want to see this. We found trace fibers from the same tarp inside Miller's truck bed liner, and under his fingernails." Laura hung up and stared out the window. The fog had lifted, but the night felt heavier than ever. They had their killer. Now they just needed to find his daughter, before the truth became another name lost to the dark. By the time David Miller was officially arrested, the town of Cedar Falls had already turned against him. The man who once smiled politely at barbecues and waved to neighbors from his driveway was now the face on every evening newscast. His mugshot, eyes hollow and jaw clenched, appeared beneath the headline: "Husband arrested after wife's body found, daughter still missing." Detective Laura Green watched the footage play on a muted television in the precinct lobby. Reporters were already camped outside the police station, microphones ready, hungry for a soundbite. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy, even among seasoned officers. Finding Karen had been devastating. But the question that haunted everyone was simple: where was Emily? In the interrogation room, David sat motionless. His wrists were cuffed to the table, his gaze fixed on a single point on the wall. When Laura entered, he didn't look up. "You've had a long night," she said, sitting across from him. "We can end this, David. Just tell us what happened." He shook his head slowly. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." For a long time, the only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioner. Then David began to speak, his voice low and strained. "She came at me," he said finally. "Karen. She wanted to take Emily. She said I'd never see my little girl again." He paused, eyes glistening. "I lost control. I didn't mean to, but when she said those words, something in me just snapped." Laura stayed silent, letting him talk. "I hit her. Once. Maybe twice. Then I panicked. I thought Emily saw me," she screamed, "and I told her to stop. I didn't mean to scare her. I just needed her to be quiet." His hands trembled. Then, it got quiet. Too quiet. For a moment, Laura felt her heart skip. What do you mean, it got quiet? He rubbed his forehead. She ran. Out the back door. I didn't chase her. I swear I didn't. Did you see where she went? He looked up for the first time, his eyes wide and unfocused. No. But she's safe. I know she's safe. It was the same phrase he'd used before. The same evasive, chilling calm. David, Laura said carefully, we found your wife's body. We found the tarp, the bat, your fingerprints. You've told me what happened to her. But if Emily's still alive, we need to find her. Tell me where she is. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. If I tell you, you'll never understand. Try me, she repeated. He swallowed hard. She's not gone, he murmured. She's home. Laura frowned. What do you mean, home? But David only stared back, a faint smile ghosting across his face. You'll see. That same evening, investigators returned to the Miller house for another full sweep. Every inch of the property was re-examined, the yard, the basement, even the air vents. A cadaver dog was brought in, sniffing through the rooms. 4 hours, nothing. Then, around midnight, the dog froze near the back of the garage. Its handler called out softly, he's got something. Behind a stack of old boxes, the concrete floor bore faint discoloration, a section about 2 feet wide that looked newer than the rest. Freshly sealed. Too fresh. The next morning, forensic crews drilled into the patch. What they found beneath made the entire room fall silent. Inside a shallow cavity lay a small bundle wrapped in a child's blanket, pink, embroidered with the name Emily. But it wasn't what anyone feared. The bundle contained not a body, but a set of children's clothes, neatly folded, along with a single stuffed rabbit and a drawing done in crayon, stick figures holding hands beneath a sun. The words, "Me and Daddy forever," were scrawled at the bottom. The find didn't solve the mystery, it deepened it. If David had hidden those items, why? To memorialize her? To cover up something worse? Laura's instincts screamed that this wasn't over. Later that day, she confronted him again. We found something in your garage, she said. His expression didn't change. You found her things, he murmured. Why bury them? To keep them safe. Safe from what? He leaned forward, whispering, from people like you. You'll twist everything. You'll make her story ugly. Laura's patience thinned. David, your wife is dead. Your daughter is missing. You need to stop pretending you're protecting anyone. He sat back in his chair, his eyes distant. You keep saying she's missing. She's not. She's with her mother. The room fell silent. Laura's heart clenched. Are you saying she's dead, David? His voice cracked, almost tender. No. I'm saying she's where she's supposed to be. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't denial. It was something worse, detachment. In the following days, forensic results poured in. Fibers from Emily's favorite blanket were found in the bed where Karen had been killed, suggesting she was present during or shortly after the attack. A neighbor reported hearing muffled shouting around midnight, followed by the sound of a truck starting. The evidence painted a chilling picture: Karen killed in her sleep. Emily possibly witnessing it. Then gone, either by accident or deliberate concealment. But without her body, the case hinged on circumstantial proof and David's twisted half-truths. When Laura left the station that night, the rain had started, slow, steady, cleansing. She stood by her car, staring at the dark clouds rolling overhead. She thought about the child who'd vanished into the fog of her father's lies. About the man who refused to tell the truth, even when it was the only thing left that could save him. And as thunder rumbled across the sky, Laura whispered to herself, "We're not done yet." Somewhere out there, hidden beneath guilt and deception, lay the final piece of the puzzle, the one that would tell them what really happened to Emily Miller. The trial of David Miller began on a gray February morning, 4 months after the discovery of his wife's body. Reporters filled the courthouse steps before sunrise, their breath forming pale clouds in the cold air. By the time the courtroom doors opened, every seat was taken. Townspeople, journalists, and distant relatives all gathered to witness what had become the most infamous case Cedar Falls had ever seen. Detective Laura Green sat near the front, her case files stacked neatly in her lap. She had spent sleepless nights preparing for this moment. It wasn't just about proving David's guilt, it was about giving Karen and little Emily the justice they deserved. When David was led in by deputies, the room fell silent. He looked thinner now, almost fragile, his once steady hands trembling as he adjusted his tie. But his eyes, cold, detached, gave away nothing. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michael Harlan, wasted no time setting the tone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harlan began, his voice echoing across the hushed courtroom, "this is a story of control, a man who could not bear to lose what he thought belonged to him. And when he realized his wife was leaving and taking their daughter, he made sure that if he couldn't have them, no one could." He pointed toward David. "You will see evidence, forensic, digital, physical, that proves this man staged a fake robbery to cover the murder of his wife and conceal the truth about his missing daughter." The defense attorney, a composed woman named Sandra Knox, countered with calm precision. "My client is not a killer," she said. "He's a man who panicked. A husband who came home to horror, then made terrible choices out of fear. The prosecution has no proof that he killed his wife, and none that Emily is dead." That last line landed heavily. None that Emily is dead. It was true. The little girl's body had never been found. Without it, the case relied on implication and motive. The prosecution called their first witness, Detective Green. Laura stood, composed, her voice steady as she described the scene she had walked into that night, the spotless floors, the blood-soaked mattress, the open jewelry box. The house didn't look ransacked, she testified. It looked cleaned. Intentionally. Whoever staged it wanted it to appear like a burglary, but there were no signs of forced entry. "And who had access to the home?" the prosecutor asked. "Only David Miller." Then came the digital evidence, the emails Karen had sent to her lawyer, the deleted text messages between David and his coworker, Lisa Turner. The jury leaned forward as each one was read aloud. "Lisa, she's going to find out. David, she won't. I have it under control. Lisa, I can't keep doing this. David, soon it'll be over. Just me and Emily." Those words hung in the air like a confession. The prosecution then introduced forensic testimony. The blood on the mattress matched Karen's DNA. The wood splinters found in the sheets matched the baseball bat handle from David's garage. Traces of motor oil and blue tarp fibers connected the body to his workplace. And on the truck bed liner, tiny fragments of the same pink blanket that once belonged to Emily. Each piece of evidence tightened the noose. But the defense fought back. They emphasized the lack of a murder weapon found in David's possession and the absence of Emily's remains. "You cannot convict a man on what you think happened," Sandra Knox argued. "You need proof." Then came David's turn to testify. He took the stand with a slow, heavy gait, glancing briefly toward the jury. His voice was soft at first, almost rehearsed. "I loved my wife," he began. "We had problems, everyone does, but I never meant to hurt her." He claimed he'd come home late that night to find the blood and panicked. "I didn't call the police right away because I knew how it would look. I didn't kill her. I thought someone broke in and took Emily. I didn't know what to do." When the prosecutor pressed him about the tarp, the landfill, and the cleaning supplies, his composure faltered. "So you're telling us," Harlan said, stepping closer, "that you found your wife's blood all over your bed, and instead of calling for help, you wrapped her body in a tarp, dumped her in a landfill, and scrubbed your house clean?" David's lips tightened. "I was scared." Scared, or guilty? The courtroom buzzed. David's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. His hesitation, his shifting tone, it all painted a picture of guilt the jury couldn't ignore. When asked one final time about Emily, his voice broke. "She's not gone," he said. "She's safe. That's all I'll say." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Each day peeled back another layer of deceit: Karen's plans for divorce, David's affair, his financial troubles, his obsession with control. The portrait that emerged wasn't of a desperate husband but of a man who saw his family slipping away and decided he'd rather destroy it than let it go. On the 12th day, the prosecution revealed one final piece of evidence: a recording from the repair shop's security camera. It showed David entering the back shed at 10:18 p.m. on the night of the murder. He carried a large plastic container, then left 20 minutes later dragging the blue tarp toward his truck. The courtroom was silent except for the hum of the video playback. When the lights came back on, David stared down at the table, motionless. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for 2 full days. The weight of uncertainty about Emily's fate hung over them like a fog. But when they returned, the foreman's face told the story before he even spoke. "On the charge of first-degree murder," he said, "we find the defendant, David Miller, guilty." Karen's sister broke into tears. David closed his eyes, his lips moving as if in silent prayer. The judge's voice was steady but grave. "You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." As deputies led him away, David turned to Detective Green. For the first time, he smiled, faint, strange, unsettling. "She's safe," he whispered again. Outside, the cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions that no one could answer. Laura stood on the courthouse steps, the winter wind biting at her face. The verdict had brought justice, at least on paper. But the image of Emily, her small face framed by dark curls, refused to leave her mind. Justice, she thought, was not the same as closure. And somewhere, beneath all the lies, the truth about that little girl was still waiting to be found. Years passed, but the name Emily Miller never stopped echoing through Cedar Falls. Her photograph, the one with the crooked smile and missing front tooth, still hung on the bulletin board at the local grocery store, its edges faded and curled. For many, the case had long been closed. David Miller was behind bars. Justice, they said, had been served. But for Detective Laura Green, it never felt finished. She'd been promoted to lieutenant since the trial, but the file stayed on her desk, its cover worn soft from years of opening and closing. She'd gone over every photograph, every interview, every piece of evidence more times than she could count. There were things about David's story, his calm, his cryptic words, his insistence that Emily was safe, that refused to settle into the box labeled solved. It was late one October evening when the phone rang. She was packing up for the night when she heard a familiar voice on the other end. "Lieutenant Green? This is Officer Denning with State Corrections. You might want to come down here. David Miller's asking to see you." Her pulse quickened. "Why?" "He says he's ready to talk. About his daughter." The next morning, Laura drove 3 hours to Redwater State Penitentiary. The prison loomed against a backdrop of rain and fog, its gray walls slick and cold. Inside, she was led through metal detectors and heavy doors until she stood before the visitation room. David Miller sat at the table, thinner than before, his hair streaked with gray. His wrists were shackled, but his demeanor was strangely calm, almost peaceful. "Lieutenant," he said with a faint smile. "It's been a while." "It has," Laura replied, taking the seat across from him. "You said you wanted to talk about Emily." He nodded slowly. You still don't believe me, do you? That she's safe. I believe she's missing, Laura said firmly. And that you're the only one who knows where she is. David leaned forward, his eyes sharp despite his frail frame. You're still looking for her in the wrong places. You think death is the only way to disappear. It's not. Then where is she, David? He looked down at his hands. Somewhere better. Somewhere I can't go. Laura's patience thinned. If you're trying to clear your conscience, now's the time to tell me the truth. He met her eyes. The truth would destroy you. She exhaled, steady but frustrated. What did you do with her? David hesitated, then whispered, I didn't kill her. I protected her. From her mother. That stopped her cold. From Karen? She was the one who ended up dead. He smiled faintly. You think you know her, but you don't. She wanted to take Emily away from me, far away. Said I wasn't fit to raise her. I couldn't let her poison our daughter. You're saying you killed Karen to protect Emily? I didn't kill her, he said quietly. She made me choose. And I chose Emily. Laura's voice hardened. So where is she? He looked past her, toward the small window where rain streaked the glass. She's home, he murmured again, just as he had years ago. She's always been home. 2 weeks later, Laura reopened the full investigation into Emily's disappearance. She requested a forensic re-examination of the Miller property, not the house itself, but the land it stood on. Technology had advanced since the first search, and ground-penetrating radar could now detect anomalies far deeper than before. When the new search began, a team of specialists swept across the backyard, scanning for disturbed soil. Most of the readings came back clear, except for one, near the edge of the property line, beneath an old maple tree that had been there long before the Millers moved in. The radar showed something unusual, a hollow cavity, roughly the size of a small chest, buried 6 feet down. Excavation began at dawn. The earth was damp and heavy, the air thick with tension. At first, they thought it might be another false lead, an old pipe, a buried tool, maybe even a forgotten pet's grave. But when the shovel struck metal, everyone fell silent. It was a sealed storage box, rusted and corroded. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were papers, dozens of them. Letters, drawings, and a worn spiral notebook with Emily's journal written across the front in a child's handwriting. Laura's heart pounded as she flipped through the pages. They began with innocent entries, school days, friends, bedtime stories, but near the end, the tone shifted. Daddy says we might have to leave soon. Mommy cries a lot. She said we'll be safe far away. Daddy says Mommy lies. I'm scared when they yell. Daddy says I have to stay quiet forever. The final page contained only one line. Daddy says home is where no one can find us. The discovery reignited the case. Media swarmed the town again. Some believed it proved David had hidden Emily's body somewhere on the property. Others speculated she had been taken by someone else, perhaps secretly placed in hiding before the murder. But there was something odd about the journal. The handwriting on the last few pages didn't match Emily's earlier entries. Forensic analysts confirmed it had been written by an adult, imitating a child's scrawl. Laura didn't need to be told whose handwriting it was. David Miller had forged his daughter's words. That spring, his attorneys filed an appeal, arguing that new evidence proved Emily was alive and that his wife's death had been accidental. A retrial was granted. When it began, the courtroom was quieter this time, smaller crowd, colder air, heavier hearts. The defense presented the journal as proof that Emily had been taken to safety, possibly with David's help. But the prosecution's handwriting analysis exposed it as fabrication. The jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning the same verdict, guilty. David's reaction was eerily calm. He looked at Laura as deputies led him away and said softly, "You'll never find her. And maybe he was right. After the retrial, Laura stood once more outside the courthouse. Rain drizzled across the steps, just as it had years before. She looked up at the gray sky, thinking of Emily, of the life she might have had, of the truth buried somewhere between love and control, innocence and obsession. The case was officially closed again, but the unanswered question lingered like fog over Cedar Falls. What really happened to Emily Miller? Spring eventually gave way to summer, and with it, the story of the Miller family began to fade from the front pages. The media moved on to newer scandals, fresher tragedies. But in Cedar Falls, the name Emily Miller never disappeared. It lingered, in hushed conversations at the diner, in the quiet prayers of churchgoers, and in the cautious glances of neighbors passing the old Miller house at dusk. No one had lived there since the trial. The property sat abandoned, its windows boarded, its lawn wild with weeds. Some said they still saw the faint glow of a light flickering upstairs at night, though the electricity had been cut off years ago. Others swore they'd heard a child's laughter coming from the backyard when the wind passed through the maple tree. For Detective Laura Green, those stories were only echoes of what the town refused to let go. The retrial had ended David Miller's legal battles, but not the questions that haunted everyone who'd followed the case. Was Emily truly dead? Or had her father hidden her away, as he claimed, somewhere beyond the reach of the law? Laura didn't believe in ghosts, but she did believe in unfinished stories. And this one still felt painfully incomplete. Months after the retrial, Laura received a small, unmarked envelope at her office. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, a blurry image of a young girl standing on a beach at sunset, her hair tousled by the wind. She looked about 10 years old. On the back, written in block letters, were 2 words, "She's safe." The handwriting wasn't David's. Her breath caught as she studied the picture. The girl's profile, the shape of her jaw, the tilt of her head, they all bore a striking resemblance to Emily. But there was no location, no date, nothing to verify where it had come from. Forensic analysis found no fingerprints, no trace DNA. The photo paper had been handled carefully, likely printed from a digital file. It could have been a cruel prank, or the truth finally peeking through the fog. For weeks, Laura chased the lead. The photo's ocean backdrop was analyzed, revealing it might have been taken somewhere along the North Carolina coast. Detectives followed up with local law enforcement, circulated the image to missing children's databases, and even consulted facial recognition software. No match. No confirmation. No closure. Still, Laura kept the photo pinned above her desk. Not as evidence, but as a reminder. Meanwhile, David Miller remained in Redwater State Penitentiary, serving life without parole. In prison, he developed a reputation for being quiet, polite, almost eerily calm. He read constantly, mostly philosophy and scripture, and spoke to almost no one. When asked by other inmates about his daughter, he always said the same thing: "She's home now." One evening, during a routine cell check, guards found him sitting on his bunk, motionless. His head was bowed, his hands clasped in his lap. He was gone, an apparent heart attack. He left behind no note, no will, no message. Only one item was found among his personal belongings, a small wooden box carved with the initials E.M. Inside it, wrapped in tissue, was a child's bracelet, pink beads with white letters spelling Daddy's Girl. Laura received the news the next morning. For a long while, she said nothing. Then she took the box, placed it in her desk drawer beside the photograph, and closed it gently. Years later, long after she retired, people would still ask her about the case that had defined her career. Some believed David had buried Emily somewhere deep in the woods, others that she'd been taken and raised under a false identity. But when reporters pressed Laura for answers, she always said the same thing. There are cases you solve, and there are cases you carry. The Miller case was both. She'd pause, her eyes distant. Sometimes the truth doesn't want to be found. Sometimes it hides where love and fear meet, and that's where it stays. On the 10th anniversary of the crime, a memorial was held for Karen and Emily at the town's small park. The crowd was small, just a few family members, old neighbors, and police officers who had worked the case. Laura stood in the back, her hair streaked with gray now, her badge long retired. As the sun dipped below the trees, a breeze swept through, rustling the leaves. A young mother nearby lifted her daughter onto her hip, whispering, "Time to go home, sweetheart." The little girl turned, smiled shyly at Laura, and for the briefest moment, Laura saw Emily, those same bright eyes, that same tiny, crooked grin. Then the child was gone, carried off into the crowd, leaving only the sound of laughter drifting through the evening air. Laura smiled softly, a tear catching in the corner of her eye. Maybe it was just her imagination. Or maybe, after all those years, Emily Miller really was safe, somewhere beyond the reach of tragedy, beyond the shadow of her father's sins. Either way, she chose to believe in that possibility. Because in the world of true crime, where endings are rarely neat and justice never fully mends what's broken, sometimes the only piece left is the hope that the lost have finally found their way home. The Miller case remains one of Cedar Falls' most haunting mysteries, a story of love twisted by control, of truth buried beneath deception, and of a little girl whose fate still whispers through the wind. Some crimes end with answers. Others end with echoes. This one left both.